but I was just wondering what your experience was with this idea, or if this is like a myth.
Yeah, so let's talk about what's true, and then let's talk about where that idea came from and like what we're finding now and break it down.
Great.
A lot of times singers make the mistake of trying to push back up to high notes or push into their new low notes as their voice is changing, and that can cause a lot of strain. We're not going to be working on range expansion as your voice is changing. You want to just allow the hormones to do their job and sing where it feels most comfortable. Sometimes I have people come in and they're like, how can I keep the same range and just gain lower notes? And I'm like,
Well,
I'm sorry, I'm not
not a
I'm
magician.
not exactly.
Well, this is what they say the like mind of testosterone is that the gear shifting is like in a different place. It's like where you used to thread the needle is, I don't know. It sounds
100%.
Hi, I'm Renee, and I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher. Today, I'm talking with Eli Conley, a queer, transgender, singer-songwriter, teaching artist, and activist based in Sacramento, California.
Of California?
Yes, of California.
Eli makes country-tinged folk music for queer and trans people, justice seekers, and anyone who doesn't fit in a box.
That's for me.
In our conversation, we talk about singing on testosterone, what actually happens to the voice when you start T, the myths and misinformation Eli had to push through during his own transition, and the lessons he now shares with others who want to keep singing as their voice changes. If you've ever wondered what vocal transition feels like for an active singer, this interview is for you.
That's for me. That's for me. That's for me.
Check it out.
Hi, Eli. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So nice to finally meet you. Why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Eli Conley. I'm a singer-songwriter and a teaching artist. I work with queer and trans folks on singing and songwriting, and I have a special interest in working with trans singers on T, like me, or who are thinking about going on testosterone.
I've been following your work for quite a while on Instagram, and I'm on your mailing list, and I'm just really excited that we get to have this conversation today.
Damn, yeah.
Yeah, so my first question is, when you first started singing on testosterone, what was the biggest piece of misinformation that you encountered? And what truth do you want singers to understand instead?
Yeah, so I started T in 2006, and at the time, pretty much all the information I could find anecdotally, there's very little information sort of formally about singing on T, but everybody I talked to was just like, I started taking T and then I couldn't sing anymore.
Right.
And that was really scary because singing was really important to me, and I also felt like testosterone was something that I needed to try for myself. And I'm really thankful to say that now, 20 years later, there are more and more folks who are out as singers, who are on T, who are performing and sound amazing. But yeah, it's amazing how much that myth still persists. I still talk to people to this day who think if I go on T, I'm going to lose my singing voice completely.
Yes.
So that's the biggest thing, is that it's absolutely not true. You can keep singing on T and sing well. You do go through some bumps along the way, just like anybody who's going through puberty and a voice change. But I think that's what's caused people to think that T will ruin their singing voice, is they kind of reach that point where things get wonky and then they think it's going to be like that forever. But thank God it is not true.
Yeah, I mean, 20 years, like I still get questions all the time from people in my comment section and my DM saying like, I want to try T, but I'm scared because everywhere I look, they say you're not gonna be able to sing, you're gonna lose range. Like, why do you think that this myth continues to circulate, even though you are like evidence against that?
Yeah, and so many folks now, thankfully.
Yeah.
I mean, it is true that like your range will shift and your voice will change, right? And so often as singers, we are really attached to our instrument. It's literally our body. It's what we're used to coming out of us. Singing is so much based on muscle memory. And so when that changes, it can be really disconcerting for singers. And I think that's also true for female assigned folks going through menopause, anybody who's going through a voice change, because it happens not just for those of us taking T. But I do think that fear comes from people getting to that place of being like, oh God, my voice is changing, I don't know what to do, and not necessarily having a voice teacher who knows anything about voice change on T, or just having experience with friends who've navigated it and actually figured out how to get to the other side successfully, because there are things you can do to help make it easier. But even if you do nothing and just wait, in general, your voice will get much better, stronger, more comfortable with time. But sometimes people take a break from singing when it gets weird. And by the time they come back, it's like, oh my God, I had this violin and now I have this cello and I have no idea how to play it. And that can be really disconcerting too. So just taking the time to like learn how to play this new instrument, if you will, with, you know, a sense of humor and letting go of what it's supposed to sound like, I think is the biggest key to finding out what is your instrument now as it changes, and then eventually once it's fully dropped.
Amazing. I feel like we're so in alignment about like the way we teach these things. I don't teach a lot of singing students anymore. I'm kind of focusing on speech,
Right.
which is why I was so glad to have you. But it really, like, just what you said makes me think that it's kind of a case of like a lack of T elders in a way. You know what I mean? Like we're missing trans guys who have been on T for 20 years. There just isn't a conversation about that. And but I'm happy to hear we're seeing like more and more singers in the space.
Yeah, we're out there, but I think especially 20 plus years ago, the singers I knew who were on T and who were performers, folks like Joe Stevens, Storm Miguel Flores, Josh Klipp, it was really hard to make a living as a trans performer. It still is, but especially in the early 2000s. And so some of those folks are not necessarily in the public eye the way that some younger trans guys and trans masculine folks are who are performers now. But I really encourage folks to seek out singers who've been on T for a long time and just like hear what they sound like. Even if they're harder, you have to dig a little bit deeper. And that's something that I'm also working on, is like starting to have playlists and things of examples of singers who are on T and are at all different stages of life and age, just to like hear the diversity of singers who have this experience.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure that people watching would love access to these playlists if you have them available somewhere.
Not yet, but it's on the list. So
Okay.
soon on my website. They'll be
Okay, people can get on your mailing list, which I'll link below.
Yep.
And you also mentioned that women assigned female at birth who go through menopause, they also experience voice changes. This is something I also tell my students, like your voice is gonna change.
Yeah.
And taking T doesn't mean you're like quote unquote ruining your voice. You're simply making an active change, which is equal like morally to one of the passive changes that could happen to your voice. You could become injured, disabled, just your voice will just change as you age naturally.
Yep.
You know?
I have friends who've like been pregnant and they're like, the hormones I had during pregnancy changed my voice and I dropped from a soprano to an alto. Like there's so many different experiences, not to mention our voices just change and deepen as we age naturally, even if we're not doing any, you know, adding anything or taking anything away to the system.
I mean, I'm not trans mask, I'm non-binary trans, and I'm loving the like voice lowering as I age. It's been like a joyful part of aging for me.
Good. Yeah, I just turned 40 and I'm like, oh, you know, opera singers, this is like when you're considered a fully
mature. I'm 38. Yeah. It's totally where I'm at too. I love it.
Nice.
So I wanted to know if you could like describe the physiology of voice changes on testosterone, specifically how it will affect singers, if you can.
Yeah. So testosterone is a steroid, so it bulks up muscles. So, you know, 20 years ago, I did not have much of a bicep. I don't work out, but now I do. And the same thing happens to vocal cords. So the folds of muscle that are like this get thicker, and you can kind of picture it like a rubber band, right? So a thin rubber band is going to stretch a lot more easily. A thicker rubber band, like maybe around broccoli, it's not going to stretch, which is what we need to go to high notes quite as easily. But that ability to vibrate more slowly to make low pitches is going to come a lot easier. So that's why for singers, our range just naturally drops as our vocal folds get thicker. But T doesn't just change the vocal cords themselves. It also changes the shape of our jaw, our neck, our face, kind of the shape of what's called the vocal tract, which I'm sure you know, Renee, but for folks listening is everything from your vocal cords up, the shape of your throat, your lips, your tongue, your jaw, your sinuses. And that sort of masculinization in tone, quote unquote, that's less about pitch drop, but is more about the change in timbre, the change in resonance, has to do with the change of the size and shape of those resonators in the vocal tract. So you kind of get two things. The first thing you notice is the pitch drop. And for singers, that often shows up as feels like maybe I have a cold at first, and then it feels like, oh my gosh, maybe the break in the middle of my voice gets a lot chunkier between chest and head, or maybe I completely lose access to those heady falsetto-y notes for a while because the vocal cords are swelling and it gets hard for them to stretch long and thin. But one important thing to know is that when they're swelling and getting bigger, some of that is inflammation that will go away with time. So there's a lot of temporary symptoms that eventually get better. But it's similar to laryngitis in a way. And so difficulty with volume, some hoarseness, difficulty with register transitions, difficulty being able to sustain a pitch for a long time, all actually really normal, especially as the voice is changing. And the main thing to do is just hang out and be like, all right, this is normal. It's hard, but I know it's not going to last forever. And eventually, once your voice is fully dropped, which can take anywhere from 2 to 5 years, depending on the dose you're on and your body, that's when you can really say, okay, now I know what my instrument is. But in the meantime, really helpful to keep singing gently, comfortably, maybe not the time to make a new record or play the lead in a musical, but absolutely continuing to sing as comfortably as you can through that time of change is really, really helpful.
2 to 5 years, I think, is what is the scary.
Yes.
It's like the scary part. It's like jumping off a cliff a little bit, right? You have to really have a lot of trust in the process. More about that time.
Yeah. So the 2 to 5 years is like the change has fully happened, right? And I'd say on average, especially for folks who are on a quote unquote higher or fuller dose, the first year is where the biggest changes happen. And then by the end of about 2 years, many folks' voice has fully settled. But there's 5 different stages, and this is based on some research that my friend Peter Fullerton has done based on a book by John M.
Big fan of Peter Fullerton, by the way. Yes, huge fan.
And we went to college together, came out around a similar time, also an amazing voice teacher who's been on T for a long time. And while I work more with singer-songwriters and folks who are doing popular music, he does a little more choral, musical theater, classical side of things, but we work together a lot. So based on Peter's research, he's really seen that the process that cis boys go through is really similar to the process that transmasc non-binary folks on T go through, where there's 3 pitch drops generally. So at first it's that just I have a cold, then there's a first pitch drop, then there's a second pitch drop, and usually in that time it's kind of the most cracking and chaotic and weird, and that's where people tend to freak out and go, oh my god, I broke my voice. But the good news is that hardest part usually only lasts a month or 2. Then there's a third pitch drop, and then the last stage is just kind of like continuing the quote unquote masculinization of the vocal tract. But the actual dropping in pitch usually happens in the first year or 2, and then it's pretty much done after that. And again, your mileage may vary, everybody's different. But I do really think that when singers go through that time where they're like, oh my gosh, maybe I can't match pitch, there might be a hole in my voice around middle C, I'm having a really hard time getting from chest to head, the biggest thing I can say is just like, don't panic. Sing wherever feels comfortable, and then with time it will get easier, especially if you do some targeted gentle vocal exercises through that time, just to keep everything limber and flexible and available to you.
Yeah, I want to talk about those targeted exercises soon, but I wanted to ask about dosage a little bit. I know you're not a medical professional, but I have heard colloquially that singers take like a lower dose of tea sometimes than the regular population, but then also and now I'm hearing that everybody takes the low dose, and I don't know what's like common with singers on testosterone now. Is there a different dose that they're taking?
I mean, it really depends on the person and what you talk to your medical provider about, because everybody's desires are different. Some people want changes to happen as fast as possible for safety or just for themselves. Some people want to go really slow. But I will say, just talking about the voice, if you want to have a smooth vocal transition as possible, I do think starting lower and then gradually ramping up, if you intend to ramp up, is helpful rather than starting at a quote unquote full dose. And I think that's where some of the myth that tea will break your voice came from, is that 25 years ago, everybody started at a pretty full dose, like 100 milligrams a week, say. And so the voice changes would happen really fast, and you would kind of run into the changes really quickly. Whereas if you start low and either stay low over time or gradually ramp up over time, it gives your voice more of a chance to adjust slowly, for you as a singer to adjust slowly to the changes in your voice. It also mimics cisgender male puberty more. They don't get flooded with a ton of testosterone right away. And so that can definitely be helpful. But again, I don't advise specific dosages because I'm not a medical person. But if you are a singer concerned about your voice, often starting lower, and then what will happen if you stay on a low dose, you'll still get to the same endpoint, but it'll just take longer. So that 5-year thing might be more true if you're on a low dose long term. Or if you ramp up over time, you can kind of feel into what feels right for me and also what's happening with my voice as I go. And the other important thing for the singers and everyone to know is you can always stop taking hormones at any point. And even though the voice change is permanent, your voice won't go back to what it was before. You don't have to fully drop into whatever tenor, baritone, bass range you might end up on if you stay on T. And that's something, especially for some non-binary singers, that feels really good to drop into maybe tenor, alto range, and then say, all right, I think I'm good. I'm going to go off for a while and like navigate this instrument as it is now and see what I think. And if eventually you go back on T again, the changes will pick back up, but you will still ultimately land in a place. It's not like your voice drops forever and ever, which can be scary.
Right.
Sometimes it feels like, you know, the hardest thing sometimes is just the unknown, honestly.
Of course. Yeah, I guess because everyone has like their eventual endpoint that's like pre-programmed in their body.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And I always understood that one of the reasons the voice changes are challenging is that your brain has like a map of your instrument. And when you go on T, the instrument changes, but the map hasn't changed. And so
Totally.
does going on a lower dose give the brain like more time to remap the instrument?
That would make sense. I haven't framed it that way before, but yeah, I've had students who say it's kind of like I open up the cupboard and everything is moved, or I walk in the house and it feels like all the furniture is in a different place. Like, because singing is so much by feel, we can't see our fingers like when I'm playing guitar. Yeah, that mapping that you're talking about, the brain to the voice, is so much what singers are using constantly all the time. And so to have it gradually shift over time, if you're on a lower dose or a lower dose ramping up, just allows you to adjust day by day. And then you just have more of a chance to like get used to it along the way as the changes are happening, rather than, you know, some people wake up and they're just like, oh my gosh, it feels like my voice dropped a fifth, which can happen. On average, people's voices drop about an octave from where they start. So it's also just helpful to know. And on average, sopranos become tenors, mezzos become baritones, altos become basses. Again, your mileage may vary, but just useful to kind of know where you might be heading potentially.
Yeah. And for those who are experiencing, like, how do I phrase this? How can you tell if somebody has a reasonable amount of tension or discomfort while they're doing this work, right? Like, I know a lot of your students probably complain about this when they're trying to learn to sing after some changes from T, but how do you know like what's too much discomfort or tension?
Totally. Yeah. What I often say is weird is good. So if I ask somebody how something feels and they say weird, I'm like, okay, that's good. That means like you're finding something new. You're not familiar with this. And by the way, I say that with all my students, not just transitioning singers. Often I'll ask a singer to do something they've never done before. And I'm like, my job as a voice teacher is to take you places you couldn't get on your own and just like help you explore and develop a variety of vocal colors and tones and possibilities. But if you ever feel pain, if it feels like you're pushing through something, or even if it feels like kind of stuck in your throat, or like there's some squeezing, if you're gonna feel like you start to cough when you're singing, that's all a sign that there's too much tension in your voice. And so doing some vocal relaxation exercises can be really helpful, which I have a video on YouTube all about vocal relaxation for transmasc folks. But it can be anything from, you know, lip trills, humming, singing through a straw, yawn size. Oh. You can do some actual massage in here if you know what you're doing, which there's some in my video.
Amazing.
But Yeah, just really that if you're having much sensation in here, other than that's interesting, that is a sign that you might be overdoing it, because we don't actually have nerves in the vocal cords themselves. And so just useful to know that, like, obviously singing shouldn't feel like nothing, but if it feels effortful, painful, squeezy, that's a sign to maybe back off and work more on relaxation again. And honestly, don't worry too much about exercising your voice as it changes. If you're feeling that, just be like, how can I sing as gently and easily as possible in whatever range feels available to me today? Because a lot of times singers make the mistake of trying to push back up to high notes or push into their new low notes as their voice is changing. And that can cause a lot of strain, actually, to push what's like, we're not going to be working on range expansion as your voice is changing. You want to just allow the hormones to do their job and sing where it feels most comfortable.
Okay. Yeah, and this is good, of course, good advice for any singer. Like, you get more when you do less typically. This is not just for trans singers.
Totally.
So it's good to remember.
Yep.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I was going to include this question in here because I'm just not sure if it's like perpetuating misinformation, but I've heard about entrapment, or like this idea that the vocal folds can grow, but if your larynx is ossified, then you won't get the growth of the larynx, and then you'll eventually have like less space for air in the glottis. And some people feel this as like having a fuller throat. Like it's more, it feels differently to even breathe. And so I was, maybe we won't include this in the video, but I was just wondering what your experience was with this idea, or if this is like a myth.
Yeah, so let's talk about what's true, and then let's talk about where that idea came from and like what we're finding now and break it down.
Great.
So what's true is that for those of us who are trans who take T, the vocal folds get thicker, but the structure of the larynx itself, the cartilages, don't actually get bigger. And that's the main difference between transition with testosterone for trans and non-binary folks and cisgender male puberty, is that they get an Adam's apple, the whole structure of the larynx gets bigger as the vocal folds themselves are also getting thicker. For those of us who take T who are trans, the vocal folds get thicker, but the whole structure doesn't actually get bigger. It's not like I have an Adam's apple now. So it is true that there is less space than we had before, and potentially less space than a cisgender male singer, although of course all voices and bodies vary.
Yeah, of course.
So that is one reason that focusing on relaxation, focusing on not over-efforting is so important for singers on T, because it is honestly easier to build tension and strain than potentially it was before. The idea of entrapment comes from a paper by Alexandros Constantis, who was one of the first researchers who is trans himself looking at singers on T. He lives in the UK. And he wrote a piece early 2000s, I want to say, that talked about something that he'd been experiencing, again, when singers were often starting at a pretty high dose, where he would experience people having this feeling of entrapment, where it felt like there just wasn't enough space in here and it was really difficult for them to sing. I don't deny that that was something that he noticed in singers, and also just given the time, I imagine he was working with a lot of folks who had been on T for not that long, let's say under 5 years. More recently, he's actually walked that back. He's still doing research and said he's not noticing that anymore. I really want to honor the research that comes from other trans voice professionals, because there's so few of us who are actually talking about our own work, and I really am sure that that is what he saw. And just recently, I'm really thankful, my friend Peter Fullerton and another voice professional who's a professional, Tessa Romano, put out a paper kind of debunking this entrapment idea in the Journal of Singing, and talking about where that idea came from, and that it really came from, they think, looking at singers who were pretty close to when their voice was actively changing.
Wow.
And that both with voice changing and also time, that tends to go away. But that this can be a kind of pathologizing term that unfortunately is still out there in the voice world, that you'll get an entrapped voice if you take T. But they have really just shown examples of a number of people, including Peter has worked with singers, and I've talked to him about this, who might exhibit what we would call entrapment if we were using Constantis's terminology. But with time, with exercise, and with actually figuring out that a lot of them, their instrument was lower than they thought it was. They're a bass and they're trying to sing baritone or tenor. They could get a much more open, easy instrument with a lot more power and comfort. So I think it's a combination of just the time and what was happening, the lack of longitudinal research, which is like long-term research about singers on T, and not just singers in those first 2 to 3 years, which is where the vast majority of research is happening, which is kind of like if you were studying male voices and you
only
looked at
studied
teenage
18-year-olds.
boys. Exactly. It's like that does not represent the full population. And yeah, with voice training and figuring out what is your actual voice part, things can absolutely get better. I've never had a student that I would describe as entrapped.
Either. I keep hearing about this,
Yeah.
and so I had to bring it up, even though I recognize that it's a little bit like,
Yeah.
it's fear mongering. It feels like sometimes.
And again, I totally get where Alex was coming from, but I just think it's that thing where because there's a lack of information about this, particularly in academia, that then gets perpetuated. And so I'm glad that Peter and Tessa are starting to put out information that debunks that. And yeah, I really, that's one of the reasons that Peter and I have really wanted to create more resources more recently. And neither of us are academics, so we don't have easy access to publishing in academic journals. But honestly, community is where I found most of the information that I've gotten about trans stuff over the course of 20 plus years. So I'm so grateful to you and others who are creating accessible resources that debunk some of the myths and also give folks good information that is grounded both in voice science and also in community ethics.
Yes, I'm very grateful for you for doing the exact same. And I'm going to link the video you mentioned earlier and maybe also this paper below so that everyone can check those things out.
Good.
Wonderful. Okay, so I want to talk about higher notes because that's another question I get all the time. I'm going to go on T. What can I do to maintain my high notes? I'm scared of losing my high range. I'm sure this is something you hear all the time as well. Can you speak on this?
100%. Yes. So there's two things. Sometimes I have people come in and they're like, how can I keep the same range and just gain lower notes? And I'm like,
Well,
I'm sorry, I'm not
not a magician.
I'm not, exactly. That's not how it works. Testosterone makes your muscles bigger. And so you're going to get low notes, but you're going to lose some of your high notes. So just to say that up front, that like there is the rare person that doesn't actually lose many of their highest high notes. But on average, like I said, voices drop about an octave. So just helpful to know that. But what sometimes people mean when they say I'm going to lose my high notes, there's two things. One is I'm going to lose my falsetto or my head register, these sounds up here, or one is I'm going to lose my belt, right? So taking my chest register up high, that really powerful kind of pop rock musical theater. I mean, we all belt, but you know, high chesty sound. So I'll answer that in two different ways. One, the head register, the falsetto, this kind of sound up here, it really does change. I often have people talk about like, oh, now I get why people like talk about head register versus falsetto as being two different things. And truthfully, they're gendered terms for the same thing. It's like people talk about falsetto in men and head register in women, and they don't think about non-binary people.
Preach.
But for some singers, it does feel useful just to be like, okay, now this feels more like a falsetto. It feels like a male head voice because it's just so different. So the feeling is going to be different because the thicker vocal cords thinning out. It's just not going to feel the same. I was a lyric soprano before my voice changed. I can still get plenty of high, heady notes, but, you know, I'm not hitting the high C anymore. I'm hitting the C5 instead of the C6, right?
Yeah, and I never could hit the high C just so everybody knows. It's not like all girls hit the high C.
No. I had a very, very high voice when I was young. Whatever your high note is, on average, you'll be about an octave below it. But there are things that you can do to learn to keep that access to the higher sound, especially after your voice has settled more, because usually there is a time in the middle where it's just really hard to access it when your vocal cords are kind of the most inflamed during the changing voice. But once that settles down, just doing like, ooh, cooing kind of sounds, or ee wee, just really gentle and easy, letting it be breathy can often be really helpful. Oh. And doing it a lot lower than where you think it's going to be, like maybe even around middle C or a little above. Not trying to push to your extreme, but just being like, where does my voice feel like it wants to shift from chest as I go up, and then it feels like it wants to get like this. Wherever that is, just playing around. Maybe it's just a whole step or a third on a given day, but just like playing with it. And eventually that sound does tend to expand back up some as your voice settles, as you get more comfortable in your new instrument. So that's kind of how we deal with these kind of a high notes. In terms of a belt, you know, I'm going to back off the mic, but See if I can do this before I've warmed up today.
Nice.
Those kind of belty notes, taking your chest register up. So I often talk about belting as a more extreme vocal behavior, where it's not that it's unhealthy, but it is just a more athletic kind of sound.
Totally.
It takes more breath pressure. It takes more pressure underneath the vocal folds themselves. And so you want to work into it slowly, step by step. You want to make sure you still have access to your falsetto head voice first. Belting without access to your head voice is just going to cause a lot of strain.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you can, even if there's a huge break, just transition.
Wait, sorry,
from one to
the mic
other.
is just cutting out some of the Lissier sounds. So can you just describe what you just did?
Oh, yes. We're not on Zoom, so I don't have original sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
So
Like a
if you
descending
are-
gliss or something.
Exactly. Just like a slide, kind of like you're going from high to low or low to high, just sliding back and forth, almost like a big yawn.
Right.
Really helpful to make sure you have the ability to go from the higher register to the lower register and vice versa first before you work on belting. But you can absolutely keep a belt, just again, it's going to be significantly lower than where it was before. Not only is our whole range dropping about an octave, but where the shifts in registers change are also dropping. And so, you know, if my high belt used to be, I don't know, a B4, let's say, above middle C, like it is lower than that now. It's a G to an A, depending on the day.
Well, this is what they say the like mind of testosterone is that the gear shifting is like in a different place. It's like where you used to thread the needle is, you know, I don't know.
100%.
It sounds really complicated to re-navigate that shift.
It's complicated, but it also is like listening to your body is the biggest thing. And certainly working with a knowledgeable voice teacher is really helpful. And, you know, it doesn't have to be me. There are more and more knowledgeable singing teachers working with singers on T. But yeah, just to know that you can absolutely still belt, but it's probably not the thing to be working on as your voice is changing. Once things are a little more settled, working on bringing your chest register back up in a healthy, safe way with a teacher, or gently, carefully, slowly on your own, paying attention to if you're feeling a lot of tension. Like belting inherently is more breath pressure, so it feels different, but you don't ever want to feel like you're like strangling yourself when you're trying to sing. That's not going to feel good. That's a long answer.
I love all that. And I also want to add in that I'm kind of anti-belting supremacy. So
Totally.
like not
Yes.
all singers have to belt. Like if you want to be a singer and you are listening to this and thinking like, how will I learn to belt? You also don't ever have to belt. Okay.
100%. Yeah. I honestly wasn't much of a belter pre-T. It just wasn't a sound that I used very much. And these days as a tenor, it is something that I use. But yeah, so many styles of singing, so many different ways to sing. If you like belting, great. But if you don't want to do it, totally fine. And also, not everybody's voice does it easily.
Exactly. Love. Okay, so can we talk a little bit more about the type of exercises that you recommend during the chaotic period that you were describing earlier? So you know, you wake up in the morning and you don't know what your voice is going to be from one day to the next.
Mm-hmm.
How should your exercises be adjusted, or what exercises should you do during this period?
So you want to keep it really just in a comfortable range, which for most of us when our voice is really actively cracking and feeling weird is going to be just kind of speaking range, chest register range, and just like real gentle, easy. You can do on a scale. It can be just like 3 notes, 5 notes, just keeping things really easy. Yawn size also always super helpful. Just big yawns to keep everything relaxed. Semi-occluded vocal tract exercises, which are anything from a hum to a lip trill to straw and water, can feel really good.
Yes, we have many videos about SOVTs on the channel that I will link below
Good.
for people to check out.
Super helpful time for SOVTEs. And yeah, just anything you can do to sing in a range that's comfortable but not push what's comfortable, and don't worry about cracks and things that happen. One thing I think it's actually really important for singers to know, all singers, is that cracks are not unhealthy for the voice. There's nothing wrong. It's just a quick shift from a thicker, chestier vocal cord to a thinner, headier vocal cord, or vice versa. But it's actually a really normal part of the voice. And, you know, some people actually use Yodel's voice
Yodeling,
breaks intentionally.
yes.
Yeah, like I sing country and folk music, so I intentionally break my voice sometimes. But just knowing that, like, whatever wiggles, breaks, weirdnesses, even holes come up all really normal. Just like keep looking for where it feels comfortable. And, it might just be a fifth for that day. It might just be an octave, and that's fine. Don't worry about pushing any range when your voice is in that really actively cracking or feeling really weird or hoarse stage.
Okay, and so I wanted to kind of end on, well, I want to talk about the grief or the frustration that can come up when people's voices change on testosterone, especially for maybe a singer who already had like a positive relationship with their voice, but they want, like you want the changes from testosterone. What advice do you give to those singers who may be experiencing that?
I think it's really important to honor that grief. I think if you're losing something that you loved, or even that you had an ambivalent relationship with, but that you felt connected to, that was a part of you, like your voice, it makes total sense to have grief, to feel loss. And it doesn't mean that you're not also excited for what's coming, or you can't also experience joy with your voice. But I think sometimes we're encouraged to have this really linear narrative about trans experience, and particular transition with hormones, that like, I hated my body before and I had to go through this really hard process to get to where I like actually finally felt like myself. Like, if that's your experience, fine. But that's not all of our experience. I never felt like I hated my body. I just felt like I wanted to try something different, and it ended up being the right thing. 20 years later, I'm still taking tea.
Nice.
But everybody's experience is different. But I will just say, like, actually creating space for the grief and talking about it with people who feel safe to talk about it with, because we're in this heightened climate around trans stuff, especially right now, where talking about anything that feels less than positive about our experience with medical transition or any form of transition can feel tricky, because we think people are going to interpret that as saying that we regret it, or that, being trans is whatever. And I think, honestly, seeking out community with other singers on T can be really helpful. Peter has a really helpful monthly space now to gather for singers and speakers on T online, just to like talk about your feelings about your voice. I teach group classes for singers on T a couple times a year, and Peter and I also offer info sessions about singing on T, where we have had over 400 people attend over the past couple of years, and
included
part of the space and part of the space is just people to share what they're thinking, what they're feeling. But I think feeling less alone, even if you know other folks on T, maybe they're not singers, there's also spaces on Facebook, on Discord. There's like starting to be more and more spaces to find people with a similar experience. But I think whether or not you can talk to somebody who's in the same boat, just talking to people in your life who know you, who love you, who support you, and who can hold that complexity with you of, I'm really sad and scared to be losing this part of myself, this voice that I care about, even as this also feels like something I need to try, is so important for our mental health, just to like actually acknowledge the full scope of emotion that we have about our voice.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's very frustrating that people can't understand that this is like a normal part of being a human. Like, we wouldn't suggest that if you get a bad haircut, that all haircuts are bad and that we should stop getting haircuts,
Yes, totally. Yeah. And I mean, it's normal about all different things, right? Like if you're having top surgery, if you're having bottom surgery, if you're getting laser hair removal, like whatever it is, there might be a part of you that's like, actually, this part of myself I really like, even though, or I feel connected to, even as I'm also ready for it to change. And for many folks, like singers, you might not be taking tea for your voice. You might be taking tea because of all the other things you feel that you need from tea. But like, if you're a singer and you feel really connected to your voice, it is a really scary transition. But just know that there are more and more of us out there who have gotten to the other side and are really happy with our new instruments. And you can be too.
Okay, I have one last thing I want to ask you, which is, because you said something so beautiful, which is that you see that voice change is an opportunity for both experienced singers and beginners. And I love that idea. Like, an experienced singer might have this grief that we were just talking about, but this like opportunity for a new beginning is also present. You know what I mean? Which we don't often get. Like, I joke as a singer that like a piano player or a guitar player, they can like put their instrument down, but I can never put my instrument down. But taking tea like gives you a new instrument, So I just wanted to know what message you have for trained singers who will need to retrain their voices.
Yeah, I mean, I think trained singers, we've spent so much time training this instrument, and now essentially you're being handed an instrument that is changing slowly. So you're going to be adjusting with it. I think string instruments are a good analogy because they can make a lot of the same kind of slidey sounds, and so much of it is muscle memory. Where is an A? Where is an A in my voice today? But just know that if you've trained your voice before, you can absolutely train it again. And you're not starting from square one. You already know how to breathe. You already know all of the ear training and scales and all that stuff that you already knew. You already know how to phrase things. You already know how to read if you read music. Like there's so many things you're not going to lose.
The musician is in your mind, you know?
Exactly. But the literal muscle memory and where pitches are, that is going to change. And so, you know, if you're a really good guitar player and then you go and pick up a mandolin or vice versa, it's going to take a minute to learn it, but you can absolutely learn it. You're not the same as someone who's never played an instrument before. And for people who've never sung, who are like, oh my gosh, now I feel like I could sing because my voice is in a place that feels more resonant, haha, to me. That's a really wonderful opportunity too, to just be like, all right, let me find my voice now, knowing that it's this new thing that I've never felt comfortable using, but like, let me play around and just see what I find. And I think that's really beautiful too.
Yeah, and actually also a lot of speech students that I have who like struggle to practice, I tell them, get a singing practice because it can be this like gender neutral, or rather like, it's not, your performance of gender is not necessarily related to the practice of singing, right?
Yep.
And you can learn everything you need to learn about your voice through the practice of singing that you would learn through gender affirming speech lessons, but maybe in a better way for you. So I think it's beautiful too.
Yeah, everybody's different. Like, I don't do speech-based work, but I often have folks come in who are like, I want to get better at singing. I'd also like to shift my voice. And I'm like, cool. Well, that's not specifically what we're working on. In the process, as you get to know your voice more, you may find that like your speaking voice, you also just have more choice in how you use it as you're training your voice as a singer.
Totally. Well, Eli, this has been such a fascinating conversation. I've learned so much. Where can people find your work, your projects, your music? Let us know.
Yeah. It's all on my website, eliconley.com, ELICONLEY. Lots of stuff there for trans singers. Also my own music. I put out a number of records. I have a new band that I'm really excited about, the Eli Conley Quartet. And my music is on all streaming services under just Eli Conley, my name. On social media, you can find me Eli Conley Music and Eli Conley Teaching on Instagram. And these days, that's the main platform I'm on because there's just so many. But who knows? Maybe someday I will learn to TikTok.
We'll get you on there. I'll put as many links as I can below. And yeah, please leave your comments for me, for Eli. And we will, we'll be in there answering questions. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much, Renee.
Thank you, Eli. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much to Eli for coming on and sharing his experience and wisdom about singing on testosterone. You can find links to his music, classes, and projects in the description below. If you like this interview, check out my interviews playlist where I talk to other amazing voice practitioners, from voice actors and singers to teachers and speech pathologists, and have incredible and informative conversations that you can't find anywhere else.
You know what I do? I super serve my niche.
By the way, I've been thinking of turning this interview series into an actual honest-to-God subscribable podcast.
Revolutionary concept, I know.
Is that something that would interest you? Let me know in the comments. That's all for today. I've been Renee, and I hope this helps. Oops. That's a line that shouldn't be there. Actually happens to the voice when you start T. Oh wait, I f***ed this one up.
No worries. We finally missed a line.
Oh!
At the beginning of the conclusion. So it still works, like going to the next line.
Wow, 40 videos in and we finally
Yeah, finally
forgot
missed
to
a line.